Welcome back to Homesteading with the Zimmermans, where we work hard and play hard on our little corner of land in Iowa. My husband and I were born and raised Old Order Mennonite, or horse and buggy Mennonite, as some refer to them as. And although we are no longer part of that culture or community, we are intentional about passing on the old-fashioned skills of our childhood to the next generation. Good morning. It is a brand new week, and in this week's video, I am going to be showing our cold room and giving you a tour of all the things that we have canned. And I've already approached the subject with Elvin, and I'm pretty sure I've convinced him to talk to us about how he built my cold room. I could show you, but it'll make a whole lot more sense if he explains how he did it. So that's what's on the agenda for this week's video. I am filming this on Monday and Tuesday because Elvin and I will be at the Homesteaders of America conference this coming weekend. So we have a road trip ahead of us, which means there's lots of prep work to do here on the homestead. But we've had a light frost last night. That means a hard frost is likely just around the corner, and we have the apples to bring in. We're gonna try and dig some more potatoes, and the carrots will be okay under the ground. We still have squash out. We're not even gonna worry about the tomatoes because we have done so many tomatoes. And the turkeys have been going to the garden and eating the ones that they can reach. So there's very few tomatoes there anymore. Nobody wants to think about tomatoes anymore. So we have some dried beans that we still will gather and shell, and the squash. But other than that, the garden is almost done. And it seems to be the perfect time for a cold room tour. Oh, my friend, the other thing that I wanted to add, my friend Jessica at Three Rivers Homestead is also doing a cold room tour or like a pantry tour, and I'm going to link her account and any other accounts because I'm filming this on Monday before I heard back from all the other accounts that were possible collaborators on this video. I will just link everybody that is collaborating with this cold room tour. I will link them in the description for you. But let's start with showing you a little bit of our recent harvest. So here is all the potatoes that we have dug so far. And we dump them down here on cardboard for them to dry. And then I sort through them. And I'll get any smaller ones that we don't like to peel, or any that won't keep, any that have been stabbed or I think they won't keep, and those we will can. But all the others we're gonna put on these racks and store them for winter. So some of our potatoes have splits like this, and I do think that that comes from moisture or temperature of the soil this summer, and those will keep because it's not open. It was all scabbed over, so it will keep. And if you don't like to, if you're not gonna can potatoes, you can actually sort these into, like, say, two different containers, and just have a use first container and a store container. So you'll want to use the ones that have any kind of blemishes. You'll want to use those first, and because they won't keep as long. I always get questions asking about these racks that I keep my potatoes in, and they are vintage bakery racks that were a gift to us from an elderly couple at our church that used to own a bakery. So when the children come home, we are going to pick all of these apples before the predicted frost tonight. But right now I'm just gathering some apples because I want to fill my dehydrator up again. So when I'm just getting started to peel the apple, I use my thumb and adjust this peeler here because I can hear my grandma scolding me for letting the peeler take off so much of the apple along with the peel. So I always pull that back a little bit. And I think it's because these apples, let me think what kind they are. I think they're Jonagolds. Pretty sure they're Jonagolds. They're more of a softer apple. So with a more firm apple, you won't have so much of the apple being peeled off. But that's okay. All these peels will just go to the pigs and go towards our bacon. And I cut the apples in half because I can fit more of them in my dehydrator when they are cut in half. So after I've done a couple apples, I sprinkle them with cinnamon and toss them. And then I just start laying them on my dehydrator. This is the most time-consuming part, and often the part that I have the children help me with, but because I want them to help me pick the rest of the apples after school, I will get this started all by myself. And it usually takes about 24 hours for me to dehydrate one batch of apples. So something was wrong with my mic here and it wasn't properly recording. I wanted to tell you is that you will never see me promote something that our family does not use and love. And one of the recent trends that I've been asked to promote is a Harvest Right freeze dryer. And here are the reasons why I chose not to and why I don't think it is a good fit for our family at the moment. I have nothing against the freeze dryer, but here's why I don't think they're a good fit for our family. Number one, we would have to get accustomed to freeze-dried food. And if you've heard me talk about it before, in most of my videos, I mentioned that my family does not make adjustments real quickly. Like they need to be broken in slowly to new foods. Now, I do know that they like freeze-dried fruit. I know that they love freeze-dried fruit, which I could freeze-dry strawberries and raspberries. I don't want to have to buy in fruit because I cannot raise enough for my family's desires. So if I start freeze-drying fruit, they would eat probably twice, if not 3 and 4 times as many strawberries as they do now from the freezer. And that would mean I need 3 and 4 times as many strawberry plants because I don't want to have to buy strawberries to freeze dry to eat, because as a rule of thumb, we try to focus most of our food that we're going to preserve, we try to focus on the ones, the varieties that we can grow here. So let's say freeze-dried apples. I'm sure they would love them. They would love them so much that I'd probably have to buy apples to freeze dry to keep up with their demand. So that's my biggest reason is we're not accustomed to eating freeze-dried fruit. People freeze dry leftovers. We don't have very many, I rarely put leftovers in the freezer. If we have leftovers, they go into the school lunches, and then if we have excess, we put them in the freezer and we enjoy leftovers from the freezer. I use my dehydrator for the herbs that we do dehydrate. The one reason I would buy a freeze dryer is if I was growing a lot of herbs and medicinal plants. I do think a freeze dryer would come in handy. And there may be a time in my life where I don't have to put all my time and energy into growing actual food, nutritious food for my active family, and I might have time to tend to more herbs and medicinal plants, and at that time a freeze dryer might come in real handy. One of the pros of having a freeze dryer is that you can preserve food that will last for years and years and years, way longer than canned or frozen food would. But that brings me to another reason why it's not economical for our family, is because right now we are maxed out with growing food for 12 to 24 months. Like we cannot grow more food than what would last us 12 to 24 months. And there again, that would mean that if I want to preserve with the freeze dryer in a way that we would, be eating these apples 10 years from now, I would be needing to buy more apples, because all the apples that we have on our trees will last us for about a year. So it doesn't make economical sense for us, because we've only got the bandwidth to grow food here on the homestead, enough food for 12 to 24 months. That's all the bandwidth we have right now. And it's one of our goals to purchase as little as possible. So yeah, that's another reason why I don't think it's a good fit for us right now. But at this point, I don't have the space for it. Every square foot of our house, especially in the wintertime, gets foot traffic. So I've got to be very conscious of that, or none of us are happy. So I don't have space for it. I don't see it being worth the space that it takes up in our home. But anyway, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on the freeze dryer, and please show up in the comments and tell me why you think a freeze dryer would work well for our family, and why you think I need one, because I'm not convinced that I have to have one. Now, if I was preparing for, an apocalypse or something like that, I would definitely be buying a freeze dryer. But as of now, our ways of preserving our food, we are perfectly happy with the way we are preserving our food. And I don't want to preserve it in a way that causes me to have to go and purchase more food to put in my freeze dryer, because that just doesn't seem economical to me. So my dehydrator is nothing fancy. I found it at a yard sale or a thrift shop a couple years ago for like $7, and it's a Nesco brand, and I will link it. And I know that there's some really fancy dehydrators, and if I was to upgrade, it would be so that I have more, that I can dry more things at a time, like to a bigger one. But helping my grandma dehydrate things, she had wooden trays, like a screen in a wooden tray, and she just set it out in the sun. And yeah, guess what? It was my job to keep the bugs and the birds away. So this is definitely easier than that. David, I've got a treat for you. Oh, you're such a fat boy. Come here, David.
this a bad one, Mom? Is this a bad one?
That's a good one. You want to put it in your pocket?
Wait, what are these called again?
They're Jana Golds. So our squash plants have produced abundantly this year. The two varieties that I planted are very similar. The one is the Canadian crookneck and the other is the Pennsylvania Dutch neck pumpkins. Maybe they're called squash and not pumpkins. I'm not positive about that. We will use these squash anywhere in baking recipes that we would use pumpkin. We will also bake them and fry them and serve them as a side dish with some meat and potatoes. If I needed to choose one vegetable or one crop that would produce abundantly, I would choose squash or potatoes or something like that. And the reason is I don't have to preserve all this squash that the garden produced because squash keeps very well in a cool, dry place. I have memories of my mom storing all her squash under our beds in the upstairs of our house because all our favorite hiding spots suddenly were filled up with squash from the garden, and she'd keep them there all winter. And what I will do is I will cook up a couple at a time and I'll make a bunch of pumpkin recipes and serve it as a side dish, and then whatever I have left I will puree in the blender and put in the freezer and just work my way through the squash that way. And if I find a squash throughout the winter that is going soft or going bad and not keeping any longer, it really isn't a loss for us because we will throw that one to the pigs and it will help our feed costs for that day. So I knew that the squash would be okay outside, even with a light frost that was predicted. But since I had boys that seemed to need an outlet for all their energy, I decided that we would pick all the squash and dig the sweet potatoes, and then that job would be done for the season. So this is my husband Elvin. You may have seen bits and pieces of him here and there, but this is his YouTube debut. This is me introducing him to you guys. Elvin works a full-time job, so he's oftentimes not here when I am filming. But I talked him into showing you guys how he built this cold room for me. So he is going to explain what he did and use the correct terms where I would probably not use the correct terms. All right, you're on.
So this is what I came up with. This is rather short term, but it was fairly easy and quick to build. I just took a corner of the basement. There's two outer walls, which are block, and I went to the store and I got some pink foam insulation. I believe it's 1.5 inches thick, and I bought some treated 2x4s and built a wooden frame and just basically boxed in a small, very small room with foam board and put a door in. And that's basically all I did to build the actual building. But I was afraid it would get stuffy without any kind of outside air because we do have a furnace in the basement, and I wasn't sure how well this would be insulated from the rest of the basement. So what I did was put in a small fan I just bought off of Amazon, It does have a variable speed, but you wouldn't need that. Any type of small fan that moves any type of air a little bigger than a computer fan would work okay. So I just put some 4-inch vent tubes. That's the intake, and this is the exhaust, and they go in the floor joist and they go to the outside. One is intake and one is output.
So would you say, Elvin, that ideally you would make your exhaust and your intake, like the vents, be much closer to the cold room?
As
like,
close as possible,
yeah,
yes.
like ideally we would have wanted them to, vent right out of the cold room, but we didn't want to lose our windows. So that is what we came up with, is to run them over there where the furnace vent goes out.
And
So,
it's also to the northwest for wintertime.
yeah. So we wanted the vents to go towards the south.
And not into the prevailing winds.
Okay, not into the prevailing winds, yeah. So here you can see what the outside looks like of my cold room. It's just this little corner here in our basement. And Elvin, did you want to tell them how you fastened the frame to the floor?
To fasten the foam board, I basically built a wood frame and put my foam boards on, nailed it on with cap nails, and filled any gaps in with foam, like canned foam. And it's not real sturdy, but there's no pressure on it or anything, so it's just there.
Where did you use the liquid nails for? You said you used liquid nails?
Oh, I use liquid nails to glue it to the wall and the floor.
Okay,
My 2x4, my wood frame.
to glue your wood frame to the walls, the concrete or the block walls, and to the floor, you use liquid nails.
Along with concrete fasteners.
Yeah. The other thing that we did, and I think you saw this on the inside, is we had to put a ceiling in it, because otherwise there would have been no use to build it here in the corner, because all the moisture, the humidity, and everything would have just come in the top. And then of course the door frame, we framed the door in. And then our basement does get fairly damp. Right outside the door I run a dehumidifier, and then sometimes if it gets too damp in here, I'll run the dehumidifier in here for a short time. But I don't like to do that more than I have to, because the dehumidifier actually gives off quite a bit of heat. So that then warms things up in here. Okay, I am in the cold room, and I'm going to start by telling you what we have on each of these shelves, in each of these jars. So right here we have pear sauce from the pears that grew on our tree, and this is some of last year's applesauce. And as you saw, we just picked this year's apples, so those will still get processed. Here I've got a little shelf of some extra green beans. And over here I've got about 4 pints of carrots left, and the carrots from this year are still out in the garden. I like to leave my carrots in the garden until after we've had a good hard frost, because the carrots are more tender and sweet then. So those are still in the garden. And then here I've got some excess grape juice that didn't fit on the grape juice shelf. On this shelf I have pickled jalapenos, and then these shelves all the way down here I have canned cabbage, like canned coleslaw. Here's one that I used the red cabbage for, and canned some coleslaw, and I will link this recipe. So all of these canned goods, if I have a video showing how we canned them, I will link the video in the description, so you can go find the other videos on how to can the coleslaw. If I find something like this one, I bumped it and the lid's loose, so it's not unusual for this amount of jars. Like there's probably 500 plus jars in this room. for me to find one here and there that the seal has broken. And this actually, because it has so much vinegar and sugar in, it doesn't even smell bad. So it's a good thing I saw it, because the kids would have been likely to bring this up and set it on the table, and we wouldn't have known it until we went to serve it. Okay, so here is all the grape juice concentrate that we canned this fall. And what we'll do, so this is grape juice concentrate, and I juice this using the steam juicer. So when we make this, we'll add the same amount of water as we have concentrate, and then we'll add some sugar. On this shelf, I have some sour cherry pie filling. And this is from 2022, because our cherry tree actually didn't give us any cherries, or not enough cherries to make pie filling this year. So this is last year's cherry pie filling. And then on this shelf, I have some pasta sauce. And some of this is from 22 and some is fresh. And next down here, we have some ketchup and some more green beans. I'm going to show you the difference between these two jars of green beans. This one I canned with zinc, and this one is without. So that's why some of these look so bright and others are more dull. And then on this shelf, we have our canned pears. These are also from our trees. These are just canned with sugar. These are spiced pears with a cinnamon stick. So on this shelf, here we've got my pineapple zucchini. So this is zucchini canned in pineapple juice, and that is pineapple zucchini. I have some zucchini relish. It's like a pickle relish that we put on hot dogs and things like that. Here we've got some canned onions. These are kind of like a sweet onion or a pickled onion, and we blend these and make like a sweet onion sauce for sandwiches with these pickled onions. This is the much less colorful corner of the canned shelf, but here we've got canned beef and some canned chicken. And here we've got some canned venison. We've got couple quarts or 1 quart of tallow left, but that's okay because we've got a Wagyu mix steer going to the locker in a couple weeks. And I've got chicken broth. Here's some more grape juice that didn't fit on its proper shelf. I've got a couple quarts of lentils, canned lentils left, and I'll just put some rice in the pressure cooker or like my Instapot, and then add the lentils, and we'll have lentils and rice. I have some canned chicken and turkey here, and all these little pints right here are pear butter or strawberry jam, and these are all jams and jellies. One of the other things that I have back there in the corner is these candied jalapenos or cowboy candy. Some people call them candied jalapenos. Some salsa down here, some more tomato juice. So down here on the bottom, we've got some apple pie filling there, and I will replenish that stock as fast as I can because that's a favorite. I've got some peach pie filling, some plain canned peaches, and then of course we've got a whole bunch of salsa and salsa up there. There at the bottom we have pickled beets and blueberry pie filling. And of course down here we've got all the pickles, and some of those lids are looking fairly rusty because those pickles are from 2021 when my pickle crop did so well. And so we canned lots and lots of pickles, and we haven't had to can pickles for the last 2 years now. Okay, so on this shelf I have my water glassed eggs, all my pasta sauce, and I think I've got some chili base. I've got some soup back there, but most of this is pasta sauce. And then of course more green beans, some overflow of pickles back there, and some more green beans. there's all my chili base. So basically that is tomato juice with all the chili seasoning in it. And then we just add beans and meat to it. And there I've got some more pasta sauce. And back there is that's all our maple syrup that we made last winter. And then up here at the very top, I have some more grape juice. I have 4 gallons of honey up there. And then I've got some olive oil and some Rice Krispies that we use to make granola. I have some coconut sugar up there. And then here in these buckets is our flour and sugar and rolled oats and some extra bulk food. And then there is, of course, the potatoes, which we still have to dig. We'll probably get at least another time that much. And over here we've got our sweet potatoes. And then we've got a little bit of onions left over from all our canning, and we'll go through those fairly fast. We will use the purple ones first because those are not keeping onions. So I'll make sure to tell the children to bring the purple ones first. And then here Elvin's got some wine, some grape wine going. And here we have all the garlic that we grew. So one question I often get is, can you store onions and potatoes and apples and everything all together in the same room? And I don't usually worry about it too much unless I have a whole lot of onions. So these onions can give off a gas that makes other things ripen too fast, and they won't keep as well. So these onions I'm not too worried about because we're going to use those in no time at all. I will not store my apples in here because apples are softer and they would definitely not keep as well with potatoes and onions. So I only want to keep the biggest and the best potatoes for long-term storage. So I sorted through all of them, and all the little ones and the ones that have blemishes on, those I will cut up and can. But I don't have time to do it this week, so that is why I have them sitting here in the cold room, because I will probably have to wait till next week to can those potatoes. And then this squash that we have already cured for a couple weeks, this we're just going to store on the outside of the cold room. Number one, because we don't have any room inside the cold room. And number two, because we don't want all of that squash in the cold room giving off a gas that will make our potatoes soft. Don't forget to go into the description and follow the channels that I have linked there and get more inspiration from their cold room and pantry tours. Well, that brings us to the end of this week's video, and I thank you so much for sticking around and watching our channel. And every week when I'm done editing, I think to myself that, well, that's it. I don't know if I can think of anything to share next week. And then guess what? You guys show up in the comments section with questions and inspiration, and just like that, I think of something that I could share the next week. So thank you for showing up in the comments with your suggestions and questions.